It begins with silence, a silence so vast that even the air seems unsure if it should move. Beneath the endless white of Antarctica, something ancient stirs, a memory older than ice, older than any civilization we know. Satellite images once brushed it off as shadow or fracture, but the lines were too perfect, the geometry too deliberate. A city, perhaps, fossilized beneath miles of frozen time. For centuries, maps called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. Yet some of those maps, like the Piri Reis chart of 1513, showed Antarctica without ice, with coastlines drawn as if someone had seen them in another age. Who then charted a continent that would not be discovered for 3 more centuries? And how did they know its shape before the world's axis tilted, before the seas froze? Scientists call it coincidence. Others whisper of something older, a civilization erased by catastrophe, swallowed by ice and myth. They say Atlantis did not sink beneath the waves. It froze. The wind carries no answers, only the faint murmur of tectonic memory, the heartbeat of a world that remembers what we have forgotten. Welcome to historic sleep. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The cold has a sound. It is not merely the wind moving through the ice, but a frequency that hums in the bones, a whisper of buried epochs. When scientists drill into the Antarctic crust, they say they hear this low vibration, a resonance that travels through layers of compressed snow older than the human species itself. Each layer carries the memory of an age, the ash of ancient volcanoes, the dust of deserts that no longer exist, the salt of vanished seas. But there are other traces, too, things that do not belong to any natural cycle. In one core sample taken near the Princess Elizabeth Land, a team detected microscopic metallic spheres, alloys unknown in nature, fused into the ice as if from some great heat. They filed it away as contamination. Yet such findings have appeared before, scattered across the continent's glacial shelves. Small, unexplainable artifacts embedded deep within the most sterile place on Earth. Beneath the ice, the continent's true face is invisible to the naked eye, but satellites have peeled back the veil, pixel by pixel. The radar images reveal shapes that make geologists pause, arcs and angles where nature prefers chaos, symmetry where glaciers should be random. Deep radar surveys in the Ellsworth Mountains show vast geometric formations buried beneath 2 miles of ice, their outlines sharp against the uneven bedrock. Some dismissed them as illusions of pattern recognition, the brain's tendency to invent order where there is none. But others quietly admitted the possibility that what lies below may not be entirely geological. In 2017, NASA's Operation Icebridge flew repeated missions over a sector near the South Pole, mapping gravitational anomalies. What they found was a dense, circular mass roughly 200 miles wide, its gravitational pull inconsistent with ice or rock. It was as if something vast, denser than expected, rested below, a sunken city turned to stone or metal. The official explanation labeled it a subglacial mountain complex. The unofficial whispers called it something else, a relic of the last planetary reset, the skeleton of Atlantis frozen in eternal sleep. To understand why this idea refuses to die, One must look back, not into myth, but into the forgotten pages of cartography. In 1513, the Ottoman admiral Piri Reis compiled a map drawn from older sources, some of which he claimed dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. The map shows the coastlines of Africa and South America with uncanny accuracy, long before modern navigation existed. But it also shows another coastline, a southern landmass, drawn without ice, perfectly aligned with the true contours of Antarctica's Queen Maud Land. This was centuries before the first Antarctic expedition, before anyone even believed such a continent existed. Modern cartographers have verified the alignment. The error margins are small enough to suggest direct observation. But observation by whom? In 1531, the Orontius Phineus map appeared, repeating the same southern shape, with rivers and mountains rendered as if copied from a survey. These maps should not exist. They depict a world as it might have looked more than 10,000 years ago, before the ice consumed the southern pole. Scholars call it coincidence or ancient speculation. Yet the coordinates, when overlaid with modern satellite data, align too precisely for chance. It is as if fragments of an ancient world map survived through oral memory, passed down from a time when the poles were warm and the seas walked differently. Geologists have long known that Antarctica was not always a frozen wasteland. Fossilized ferns and tree trunks lie entombed beneath the ice, remnants of forests that flourished 40 million years ago. But more intriguing are the findings of pollen traces and freshwater diatoms within much younger ice layers, suggesting that parts of the continent may have been temperate only thousands of years ago. This would place habitable conditions within the range of early human civilization, perhaps overlapping the same window Plato described for Atlantis. If true, it rewrites the boundaries of where our ancestors could have lived and how much they might have known. There are those who propose a mechanism. Crustal displacement, a theory revived in the 20th century by Charles Hapgood. He suggested that the entire outer shell of the Earth can shift over its molten core, moving continents thousands of miles almost instantaneously in geological terms. Albert Einstein himself wrote a foreword supporting the idea as worthy of careful consideration. According to Hapgood, such a shift could have displaced an advanced civilization once thriving in a warm polar region, burying it beneath ice as the planet's crust realigned. If that occurred around the end of the last ice age, 12,000 years ago, the same period of sudden global flooding, species extinction, and mysterious cultural collapse across the planet, it would explain the persistence of the Atlantis story across continents. The mainstream view rejects this, preferring gradualism to catastrophe. Yet even conventional geology admits that Antarctica's ice sheet formed rapidly, not slowly, in response to a dramatic climate shift. Something happened at the end of the Pleistocene, something violent enough to raise seas hundreds of feet and drown entire coastlines. In North America, massive meltwater floods carved channels wider than modern rivers. In the Middle East, ancient lake beds dried overnight. In South America, high-altitude glaciers melted so quickly that valleys were buried under walls of ice and mud. The Earth's axis wobbled, magnetic poles flickered, and within a few centuries the climate stabilized into the one we now inhabit. The memory of that chaos survived in myth. A great flood, a city lost, gods who descended and vanished. If such a catastrophe buried a civilization beneath Antarctic ice, its traces would lie locked away, perfectly preserved. And perhaps they do. Soviet expeditions in the 1950s drilled into the subglacial Lake Vostok, a body of water sealed beneath more than 2 miles of ice for millions of years. When the borehole reached its surface, instruments detected an anomaly, heat and salinity inconsistent with glacial origin. In 2012, when modern teams sampled the ice above the lake, they reported genetic fragments unknown to any catalogued organism. The results were quietly buried in supplementary data, dismissed as contamination. But whispers persisted that the ice contained something else. Fossils of microbial life not from this epoch, perhaps not from this world. Parallel to these discoveries were rumors of military expeditions disguised as scientific missions. In 1946, the United States launched Operation High Jump, one of the largest Antarctic expeditions ever undertaken, led by Admiral Richard Byrd. Officially, it was for research and training. Unofficially, Byrd's later statements hinted at something else: encounters with flying craft that could move from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Newspapers at the time quoted him describing a threat that could strike from the poles. Those reports were quickly retracted. His private diary, released decades later, speaks in strange metaphors: an entrance to the earth, glowing spheres, a meeting with beings of light beneath the ice. Whether genuine or apocryphal, the story fueled decades of speculation that Antarctica hides not only ruins, but gateways. Even modern agencies treat the continent with curious caution. Certain sectors remain off-limits, marked as environmentally protected zones, though satellite imagery shows nothing unusual, except, perhaps, the outlines of geometric shadows. In some areas, flight paths are restricted. In others, seismic readings are classified. If nothing lies beneath, why such secrecy? Some say it is merely politics, the result of treaties and territorial claims. Others sense a deeper reason, that what is buried there challenges not only history, but identity. Because if an advanced culture once lived at the pole, who were they? Were they descendants of survivors from a previous cycle? Keepers of knowledge lost in the Younger Dryas cataclysm? Or were they something older still? An echo of beings who seeded civilization across the world before the rise of recorded time. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of gods descending from the sky to teach humanity. Andean legends tell of Viracocha emerging from the lake to rebuild a shattered world. Egyptian priests told Solon that the Greeks were children, that all knowledge had been lost before in fire and water. These myths share an origin event, the fall of a golden age. If such a memory was not merely metaphor, it might trace back to the same disaster that entombed a southern empire beneath the ice. The mind resists such ideas, conditioned to separate myth from science. Yet the boundary is thinner than we think. When tectonic plates collide, they erase continents and rewrite coastlines. When civilizations fall, they leave behind only symbols, fragments, and questions. Antarctica is the ultimate symbol of that erasure, a mirror of collective amnesia. Beneath its silence lies not emptiness, but the density of forgotten memory. Every radar echo, every gravitational anomaly, every forbidden map suggests that our timeline may not be linear but cyclical, spiraling through destruction and rebirth. Night falls differently at the pole. It is not darkness but an absence of direction, a void that seems to swallow even thought. Imagine standing there, surrounded by an ocean of ice that once might have been fertile ground, a place of cities and temples now fossilized beneath the pressure of ages. Somewhere below, perhaps, lies a doorway, sealed not by myth, but by time itself. And if the ice were to melt, if the earth were to tilt once more, what would emerge? The hum returns, that same vibration recorded by the scientists, the sound of ancient tectonics or something older, pulsing faintly beneath the continent's heart. The instruments call it background noise. Others might call it remembrance. The ice, after all, is not dead. It listens. There are moments when history feels like a reflection seen through fractured glass. You can trace the contours, sense the depth behind it, but every image is doubled, distorted, scattered by time. Atlantis is that kind of reflection, half truth, half mirage, shimmering between archaeology and dream. If its bones lie beneath Antarctica, then the story of human civilization must be older, deeper, and stranger than we have allowed ourselves to believe. But to follow that thread, one must step away from the frozen continent and listen to the echoes that ripple through every culture, every ancient text, whispering of a world before the flood. In Egypt, priests told Solon that their records went back thousands upon thousands of years before the Greeks ever built a city. They spoke of a civilization that rose to great heights before being swallowed by the sea in a single night. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts the same deluge, the same drowning of the world, and the survival of a single chosen remnant. In Mesoamerica, the Popol Vuh describes the destruction of earlier human races by water and darkness, and in the Andes, legends say the god Viracocha emerged after a flood to teach the survivors how to rebuild. Everywhere, the same pattern returns: a golden age, a catastrophe, and the rebirth of knowledge. It is as if the entire species remembers one wound, carried like a scar in its collective memory. The last great flood, according to modern geology, occurred near the end of the Younger Dryas period, around 12,000 years ago. Ice sheets that had covered continents melted abruptly, raising sea levels by hundreds of feet. Coastlines vanished, islands drowned, and inland seas overflowed. It was a planetary event of almost unimaginable scale. Yet in the mythic imagination, it is always told as punishment, as cleansing, as the turning of an age. Perhaps that is because those who survived saw more than destruction. They saw the erasure of everything they had built, and the need to begin again from nothing. If a civilization as advanced as Atlantis truly existed, that flood would have been its grave. But where did that civilization originate? Plato wrote that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, an island larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. Its people, he said, possessed knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and energy that surpassed that of his own age. They built concentric cities, canals, and temples plated in precious metals. And then, in one night of earthquakes and floods, it disappeared. To many, these are the marks of allegory. Yet Plato claimed his account came from Solon, who had heard it in Egypt, from those same priests who claimed records older than the flood itself. If Solon's source was genuine, then the story was already ancient even in his time. In the 20th century, the American psychic Edgar Cayce revived the idea with a strange precision. He spoke of Atlantis as a technologically advanced society destroyed by its own misuse of power. He claimed its survivors fled to Egypt, the Pyrenees, and the Andes, preserving fragments of knowledge that later became the seeds of human civilization. According to him, the final destruction occurred around 10,000 BCE. the same date modern science assigns to the sudden end of the last ice age. Casey's words were dismissed as mysticism, yet his timing aligned uncannily with geological data unknown in his day. Some saw coincidence. Others wondered if intuition could sometimes remember what reason forgets. Charles Hapgood's theory of crustal displacement added a mechanism to the myth, suggesting that the outer shell of the Earth periodically shifts, moving entire continents to new latitudes. If the Antarctic landmass once lay closer to the equator, it could have supported a temperate, even tropical civilization. When the crust shifted, the continent would have slid toward the pole, freezing everything in place within centuries. The survivors, scattered across the world, might have become the culture bearers remembered as gods and teachers by later civilizations. The sudden rise of monumental architecture in disconnected regions, Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia, Caral in Peru, and the pyramids of Egypt, could then be echoes of a single memory, the attempt to rebuild what was lost. Göbekli Tepe, in particular, defies explanation. It dates to around 9600 BCE, when humans were supposedly nomadic hunter-gatherers. Yet there, on a remote hill in Turkey, stand stone circles carved with precise astronomical alignments and reliefs of animals no longer native to the region. The site was intentionally buried after centuries of use, as if to preserve it for a future age. No one knows who built it or why, but its date coincides exactly with the end of the Younger Dryas, the same moment when, according to both myth and geology, the world changed forever. If one follows Hapgood's logic, this was when Antarctica froze, and when the last remnants of an older civilization resurfaced briefly to teach what they could before vanishing again. In South America, similar patterns emerge. The ruins of Tiahuanaco and Puma Punku near Lake Titicaca stand at altitudes too high for easy habitation, yet their megaliths weigh hundreds of tons, fitted with a precision rivaling modern machining. The blocks are interlocked with complex geometric joints and show signs of advanced stone-cutting tools. The indigenous legends call the builders the gods before the sun, beings who arrived after a great flood. Archaeologists debate the dating, but some believe the oldest layers may predate Inca civilization by thousands of years. The site's alignment with solstices and equinoxes suggests astronomical knowledge far beyond its supposed age. If survivors of a lost civilization did settle here, they carried not just tools, but an entire cosmology. The same patterns repeat across continents: the sudden appearance of agriculture, of architecture, of writing, as if from nowhere. Conventional history explains this as parallel evolution, the inevitable result of human intelligence reaching a threshold. But what if it was memory resurfacing? Not invention, but recollection. Not progress, but restoration. The myths of gods descending from the sky might be memories of refugees arriving from a drowned homeland, bearing the remnants of their science disguised as myth. The temples of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the step pyramids of Mesoamerica, all echoes of one architectural idea: the mountain that connects heaven and earth, perhaps modeled after the concentric rings of Atlantis itself. The deeper question is why these memories persist. If they were only legends, time should have dissolved them long ago. Yet they reappear wherever humans settle, as if encoded in the collective psyche. Perhaps trauma leaves geological layers not only in the earth, but in consciousness. The flood, the fall, the frozen continent, These are not merely stories, but archetypes, fragments of a pattern repeating through cycles of creation and destruction. Some esoteric traditions call this the Great Year, the precessional cycle of the Earth's axis, roughly 26,000 years long. At its turning points, they say, the world resets. The Atlantean age may have been the last peak before the fall, the moment of light before the long descent into forgetting. Modern science is beginning to rediscover fragments of this cycle in its own language. The study of geomagnetic reversals, orbital eccentricities, and cosmic impacts reveals that Earth's climate oscillates in sudden, catastrophic leaps. The Younger Dryas itself may have been triggered by a comet impact, its debris cloud plunging the planet into chaos. Such events would have obliterated coastlines, erased civilizations, and forced survivors to start anew. If that impact struck the ice sheets, it could have destabilized the crust and accelerated the freezing of Antarctica. The legends of fire and water, of the sky falling and seas boiling, suddenly take on geological weight. Myth becomes a form of data, encoded in metaphor. And yet, there is a resistance, a need to forget. Mainstream academia dismisses such connections as pseudo-archaeology, arguing that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. They are right, perhaps, but evidence melts, drowns, and burns. What remains are questions, and questions are more dangerous than answers. Why do forbidden zones exist in the most remote parts of Antarctica? Why are certain discoveries redacted, sealed under national security laws? Why did ancient cartographers draw the continent ice-free? Why do myths separated by oceans and millennia describe the same cataclysm? Coincidence may explain one or two, but not all. Perhaps the real secret of Atlantis is not its location, but its recurrence. Each time humanity reaches a certain threshold, technological, spiritual, or moral, it resets. The flood, the freeze, the fire, they are cycles of correction. The Earth, as a living organism, purges imbalance. Atlantis may have been one of many civilizations to rise and fall beneath this law. Its ruins, whether under the ice or beneath the sea, are less important than the warning they represent. Civilization is not a ladder, but a circle. Every summit is also a precipice. And still, something in the ice calls. The instruments record faint pulses of heat beneath the Antarctic crust, geothermal anomalies, officially. Unofficially, some describe them as rhythmic, patterned like signals. In 2018, a radar array detected regular fluctuations beneath the Willan's ice stream, as if a buried system were releasing energy at intervals. Most dismissed it as hydrological pressure. But a few, quietly, speculated that something mechanical, or intentional, might be stirring. It is easy to mock such thoughts until one remembers how many myths turned out to contain truth. Troy rediscovered, the lost cities of the Amazon unearthed, the Sahara revealed to have once been green. The boundary between legend and science is merely the distance between disbelief and patience. Perhaps one day the ice will reveal what it hides. But revelation comes at a cost. The melting of Antarctica would not only uncover history, it would rewrite the present, flooding cities, displacing millions, erasing our own version of civilization. In that sense, the return of Atlantis may already be underway, not as discovery, but as mirror. The same warming that exposes the ancient continent may drown our own. The cycle repeats, silent and impartial. In the dim light of the polar night, the aurora moves like a living thing, curtains of green fire breathing across the sky. Beneath it, the ice shifts and groans, the sound of continents remembering. There is no voice, no face, no proof, only the feeling that something vast is waiting. Perhaps not a city of gold or crystal domes, but the memory of who we were before forgetting became survival. The stars above turn slowly, indifferent, ancient, precise, the same stars the Atlanteans once watched before the sky fell. And if somewhere, deep below the frozen sea, a structure still hums with trapped energy, its purpose long lost, its architects long gone, then maybe what we call myth is only the faint afterglow of their light, flickering through time. The ice does not lie. It only waits. There are places on Earth where silence becomes almost sentient, where sound seems to curl inward instead of expanding outward. Antarctica is one of them. Its vastness compresses time, folding millennia into a single breath. Beneath that frozen stillness, modern science continues to uncover layers of the planet that feel more like memory than geology. The ice cores drawn from its depths read like chapters of a forgotten epic, each stratum a verse in the story of climates, extinctions, and rebirths. Yet, within those same cores, anomalies persist. Tiny traces of dust that contain isotopic ratios suggesting volcanic eruptions never recorded, spikes in carbon that do not match any known timeline, and sudden shifts in temperature that occur almost instantaneously. These interruptions in the geological script suggest something violent, something that changed the world in a blink. They whisper of a trauma the Earth has not yet healed from. To scientists who study the magnetic field, Antarctica is even stranger. Buried beneath its frozen crust near Wilkes Land lies a massive circular structure over 300 miles wide, detected by NASA's GRACE satellites. Its magnetic field is distorted, forming an almost perfect ring. Some researchers interpret it as the remnant of a colossal asteroid impact, perhaps the event that triggered the Permian extinction 250 million years ago. Others, more quietly, speculate it could be the remnant of something artificial, a formation too symmetrical to be explained by impact alone. The gravity maps show a central mass denser than the surrounding rock, as if a metallic core still sleeps beneath. Officially, it remains a mascon, a mass concentration anomaly. Unofficially, it is the single most restricted coordinate on the continent. If the ring is truly an impact site, then it marks the place where life itself was reset. But there are other interpretations, those whispered among geologists who believe in cyclical cataclysms, who see patterns in the fossil record that repeat like cosmic breath. Every few million years, the planet tilts, the magnetosphere flips, and continents migrate. Species die, new ones rise. Some cultures called these world ages. In that sense, Atlantis might not have been the first civilization erased, only the last. The Antarctic anomaly, then, could be a scar not just of impact, but of transition, a gateway between epochs. When explorers first reached the continent in the early 20th century, they encountered more than just ice. Fossilized ferns, trunks, and pollen suggested that this place was once a green paradise. Some of the earliest finds, in the trans-Antarctic mountains, included the remains of freshwater plants, evidence that rivers once flowed here under a temperate sky. Later, the discovery of fossilized amphibians and reptiles hinted at entire ecosystems now locked in permafrost. These fossils date not only to the age of dinosaurs, but, curiously, some to far more recent eras. How could temperate species have survived here so late unless the climate shifted suddenly and catastrophically? In 2013, researchers drilling into the subglacial Lake Hodgson, sealed beneath 400 meters of ice for hundreds of thousands of years, found microbial life still active in the darkness. The water temperature there is below freezing, yet hypersaline conditions keep it liquid. When the samples were analyzed, the DNA fragments bore no close relationship to any known species on Earth's surface. One geneticist described it as like opening a tomb to a parallel biosphere. Some dismissed the results as contamination. Others wondered if these microbes might be descendants of organisms that thrived before the freeze, survivors of an ancient ecosystem that has continued, unseen, beneath the ice. If so, Antarctica is not dead, it is dreaming. The idea of a hidden biosphere beneath the continent leads inevitably to speculation of something more. Radar imaging has revealed massive voids beneath the ice, caverns large enough to fit cities. These spaces, warmed by geothermal vents, maintain stable temperatures and have their own atmospheric circulation. Some scientists theorize that such chambers could harbor unknown life forms. Others suspect they conceal more. The ancient myths of Hollow Earth civilizations, though often dismissed as fantasy, may have roots in misunderstood geological reality. The Nazis, during their ill-fated 1938-1939 expedition, were obsessed with these possibilities. Operation Neuschwabenland mapped portions of Queen Maud Land, photographing ice-free oases and marking them as New Schwabenland. Later accounts, half rumor, half classified, claimed that the expedition established underground bases in natural caverns, warmed by geothermal heat. After the war, Allied intelligence investigated those claims, only to find records missing or destroyed. The mythology of Base 211, a secret refuge beneath the Antarctic mountains, grew from the ashes of that silence. When Admiral Byrd returned to Antarctica in 1947 with Operation High Jump, his mission was described as scientific exploration. Yet the scale, 13 ships, 30 aircraft, and over 4,000 men, spoke of something else. Byrd's statements after the mission fueled more questions than they answered. He warned of an enemy capable of flying from pole to pole at incredible speed. Soon after, the operation was abruptly terminated. His later diary, if genuine, describes a surreal encounter deep within the ice, where he claims to have entered a lush valley filled with light and met beings who spoke of humanity's arrogance and its coming trials. Whether real, symbolic, or fabricated, the account is suffused with the same theme that haunts every Antarctic myth, the idea that something ancient watches from below. Modern technology has only deepened that mystery. In 2018, scientists recorded low-frequency acoustic signals beneath the Ross ice shelf, vibrations that repeat with rhythmic precision, as if the continent itself is singing. The phenomenon was explained as wind patterns vibrating the snow dunes above the shelf, but the regularity of the tone, almost harmonic, led some to call it the voice of the ice. Seismographs across the continent have also registered micro-tremors that do not align with tectonic activity, occurring in symmetrical intervals. The data remains inconclusive, but to those who listen with imagination, it sounds like breath, the slow exhalation of a sleeping giant. To view these mysteries as coincidences requires faith of its own. Because Antarctica is not a random wasteland, It sits directly over the South Magnetic Pole, a place of extraordinary energetic flux. Magnetic anomalies here can distort compass readings and even interfere with radio frequencies. Some physicists have proposed that such anomalies may represent residual signatures of an ancient geomagnetic alignment, possibly related to the planet's earlier axial configuration. If Hapgood's crustal displacement theory holds any truth, then this was once a region of great stability, perhaps a central hub of Earth's energetic grid. In mythic terms, it was the axis mundi, the world's pivot. When that axis shifted, the balance broke, and the world's magnetic memory froze along with the continent. In recent years, satellite imagery has revealed linear patterns beneath the ice, structures hundreds of miles long, too regular to be dismissed as chance. Some appear to connect mountain ridges, others form geometric shapes eerily reminiscent of city layouts. Most are ignored by mainstream science, filed under glacial flow artifacts. Yet a small group of independent researchers continues to analyze them, arguing that the patterns align with ancient planetary geometry, the same sacred ratios found in the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, and Teotihuacan. If these alignments are intentional, they suggest that whoever built them understood the Earth as a living grid and positioned their structures along its energetic meridians. Such knowledge would have required not only advanced mathematics, but a global awareness we are only now rediscovering through satellite technology. The echoes of this lost science appear elsewhere, too. Ancient temples around the world share precise alignments with solar solstices and star systems like Orion and Sirius. In Antarctica, radar returns have revealed what some claim to be pyramidal peaks protruding from the ice, arranged in triangular formation. Most geologists insist they are nunataks, mountaintops exposed by glacial erosion, yet their symmetry defies casual explanation. Photographs show sharp angles, smooth plains, and proportions eerily similar to the Giza complex. If natural, they are extraordinary coincidences. If not, then they may be remnants of a civilization that mastered a global architecture based on resonance and geometry, an architecture now sleeping under the Antarctic sun. What unsettles most is the sense of intention. The continent feels designed, not in the theological sense, but as if shaped to conceal rather than reveal. It guards its past fiercely. Every discovery leads deeper into ambiguity. Fossils that rewrite timelines are quietly reclassified. Radar anomalies are labeled processing errors. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, forbids any nation from claiming the land, militarizing it, or exploiting its resources. On the surface, it appears a gesture of peace. Beneath, it ensures that no single entity can dig too deep. Perhaps this is coincidence, or perhaps it is the modern version of an ancient covenant to protect something that must not yet be unearthed. When the aurora dances over the ice, it looks like thought made visible, a pulse of the planet's electric mind. Each ribbon of light bends to the invisible currents of the magnetic field, tracing pathways older than civilization. If those pathways once guided travelers from a warmer age, then perhaps the aurora was their compass, their divine geometry written across the night. The same light now illuminates our research stations and our disbelief. It flickers over instruments and satellites, over faces peering into data that makes less sense the longer it is studied. And sometimes, just for a moment, a pattern appears, a resonance between the sky and the ice, as if some buried intelligence is answering. To stand there in that silence is to feel the thinness of our knowledge. Every certainty we hold is only as solid as the ice beneath our feet, and the ice is always moving. The story of Antarctica is the story of amnesia, of a world that hides its past under layers of purity. Yet the deeper we dig, the more impurity we find. Metal spheres, carbon spikes, isotopic ghosts of vanished warmth. Each one a clue, each one a whisper. If the lost continent of Atlantis exists anywhere, perhaps it is not a place but a frequency, a resonance buried in the magnetic memory of the Earth, waiting for consciousness to tune itself again. The ancients might have known this, encoding the truth in myth because words could not contain it. And now, as we orbit the planet with satellites and sensors, we are only beginning to see the same patterns they once saw from their towers of stone. The ice is not merely frozen water, it is frozen time. Beneath it, the clock still ticks, counting down to the moment when the past and the present converge once more. Somewhere below, under 3 miles of silence, the old world sleeps. Whether it was a city, a temple, or something that transcends both, no one can yet say. But when the wind moves across the polar plateau, it sounds almost like memory stirring. A low, steady hum that could be the voice of the planet itself, remembering the last time it thawed. The human mind is drawn to edges, to horizons, thresholds, and the borders between what is known and what is possible. Antarctica is the ultimate edge, the white curtain at the bottom of the world where myth and science blur together. Those who have stood upon its endless plateau often describe an uncanny sensation, a feeling that something immense lies just beneath awareness. Even seasoned explorers speak of hearing distant reverberations, as if the ice itself remembers. Beneath their boots, a continent sleeps, one so vast and so ancient that the mind struggles to hold its scale. Yet, the more we study it, the more it seems the ice is not merely concealing geology, but intention. Recent studies of the continent's bedrock have revealed patterns that should not exist. Underneath the ice sheet, radar mapping has traced enormous circular depressions linked by linear ridges, each thousands of miles apart, yet geometrically related. They correspond with gravitational anomalies, dense masses distributed in precise ratios across the landmass. When projected onto a global coordinate grid, these anomalies form alignments with ancient megalithic sites across the planet. Giza, Teotihuacan, Easter Island, and the Great Zimbabwe ruins all lie on the same geodesic path intersecting Antarctica's magnetic core. Statistically, the odds of such alignment occurring by chance are infinitesimal. And yet it exists, etched into the Earth itself, as if a forgotten hand once drew the world with mathematical precision. To some scientists, this pattern is merely a byproduct of spherical geometry, a curiosity of cartographic coincidence. But others sense something deeper, that the ancients knew the world as an interconnected, energetic field. The Egyptian term, meridian of the gods, the Chinese dragon lines, and the Polynesian mana paths may have described the same phenomenon. Currents of subtle force flowing through the planet's structure. If this grid once pulsed with energy, Antarctica would have been its southern anchor, the pole through which that current entered the Earth. The cataclysm that froze the continent might therefore have been more than geological. It could have been energetic, a collapse of resonance that shattered the world's balance. In the last decade, a quiet collaboration among astrophysicists and geobiologists has begun exploring what they call telluric resonance, the low-frequency vibration produced by the Earth's rotation, magnetism, and core convection. These Schumann resonances, as they are known, fluctuate subtly across time, peaking roughly every 12,000 years, the same cycle that coincides with mass extinctions, polar shifts, and sudden climate reversals. The implication is unsettling. The planet's energetic pulse might dictate not only weather and magnetism, but consciousness itself. Civilizations rising in resonance with that pulse would flourish in harmony with the Earth's field. When it faltered, they would fall. Atlantis, in this view, was not destroyed by external punishment, but by dissonance, its own misuse of energy disrupting the frequency that sustained it. The notion may seem mystical, yet fragments of evidence surface everywhere. In Egypt, the Temple of Dendera features reliefs depicting what appear to be resonant bulbs or plasma tubes emitting light through vibration. In India, the Vedic hymns speak of Vimanas, powered by soma and sound. In the Andes, stones are fitted so precisely that a knife blade cannot pass between them, suggesting a form of sonic manipulation. Archaeologists dismiss these correspondences as independent innovations. But if an earlier civilization once mastered frequency, the language of matter, it could explain both their miracles and their downfall. Energy, in its purest form, is indifferent to wisdom. Antarctica, with its magnetic heart and crystalline crust, would have been the perfect amplifier for such forces. Quartz-rich granite beneath the continent could act as a natural conductor, the ice above as an insulator. Together they form a resonant chamber on a planetary scale. If ancient engineers understood this, they might have built structures tuned to those harmonics, cathedrals of vibration that drew power from the Earth itself. The pyramidal formations detected under the ice, the radial symmetry of subglacial ridges, the concentric rings hinted at by satellite imagery, all could be remnants of that lost technology, fossilized architecture still humming faintly in frozen time. It is not only the stones that remember. Modern instruments measuring electromagnetic activity near the South Pole have detected repeating pulses, signals cycling every few hours, precise to the second. Officially, they are described as magnetospheric oscillations, the result of solar wind interacting with the Earth's field. But the regularity, the structure within the signal, unsettles even the most rational observers. Some have compared it to a coded transmission, a pattern of order within chaos. Perhaps it is simply the planet speaking its own language, a dialect of magnetism we have yet to translate. Or perhaps it is an echo, a message from something that once used the planet itself as a transmitter. If so, it would not be the first time human history has brushed against such enigma. The ancients spoke often of voices from the heavens, of gods who taught by sound and light. The Sumerian Enki, the Egyptian Thoth, the Mayan Itzamna, all are described as beings who shaped creation through resonance. In every myth, knowledge is delivered from above, corrupted, then lost. What if these were not supernatural beings, but survivors, those who understood the Earth's resonance and tried to recalibrate it after the fall? Antarctica, as the pole of silence, might have been their final laboratory, the place where they attempted to stabilize a dying world. The failure of that effort could have sealed their fate and ours. In 2021, a research drone scanning the Shackleton Range captured something unexpected. Beneath the ice, at a depth of nearly 2 miles, radar returned a pattern of vertical columns forming a perfect hexagonal grid over several square miles. The official report labeled it a subglacial basalt formation. Yet basalt does not arrange itself in uniform cells of identical height and spacing. Some speculated it was the remains of an ancient volcanic field. Others, less constrained, suggested it might be structural, a foundation, perhaps, or the top of something far larger buried below. The data vanished from public databases within months, cited as processing artifacts. But fragments of the radar images leaked to private researchers. What they showed was unmistakably geometric, hauntingly deliberate. Such discoveries rarely make headlines. They linger in obscurity, discussed only in the corners of scientific conferences or in encrypted online forums. A handful of geophysicists, analyzing the magnetic anomalies around those coordinates, noted a resonance pattern matching the Schumann frequency precisely, 7.83 Hertz. That same frequency is found in human brainwaves during deep meditation and trance. The idea that a planetary resonance could entrain consciousness might seem fantastical, yet countless traditions describe enlightenment as tuning to the Earth. Perhaps ancient Antarctica was more than a civilization. It was a consciousness network, a living instrument through which humanity once communed with the planet. When the resonance failed, the instrument froze, and memory itself fractured. The more one contemplates this possibility, the more history begins to look like recovery rather than evolution. Each culture, in its own way, has tried to rebuild fragments of the lost frequency. The stone circles of Britain hum faintly with electromagnetic anomalies. The pyramids of Mesoamerica vibrate audibly in the wind. Even modern cathedrals, with their arches and choirs, replicate the acoustic geometries of resonance. All of them are attempts to remember the song of the world, the same song now muffled beneath the Antarctic ice. Perhaps that is why humanity is drawn so irresistibly to the poles, to test the limits, to touch the veil. Every expedition south carries an unspoken hope that the ice will part and reveal something, an artifact, a signal, a doorway. And yet, each revelation only deepens the mystery. We find microbes that should not exist, minerals that defy classification, voids that radiate heat from unknown sources. The deeper we look, the more it feels as if the continent is protecting a secret not of matter, but of meaning. It is as though the Earth itself does not yet trust us with the truth. There is an ancient Buddhist concept that worlds arise and perish in the blink of a cosmic eye, and that within each world countless civilizations bloom and vanish like foam on the sea. Antarctica might be the frozen crest of one such wave, a world caught mid-collapse, its energy crystallized in silence. If one could melt the ice, perhaps time itself would resume, and we would hear again the resonance that once guided the pulse of humanity. But to awaken that song too soon might be dangerous. Every myth warns of those who tried to control creation's frequency and were undone by their own hubris. The Atlanteans, the Nephilim, the shining beings of Hyperborea, all cautionary reflections in the same frozen mirror. As night settles over the polar plateau, the aurora returns, undulating across the sky like liquid magnetism. Beneath its light, the ice stretches infinitely, luminous and indifferent. Somewhere far below, the lost city, if it ever existed, rests in perfect stillness. but above it the air hums faintly, a resonance on the edge of perception. Scientists call it interference, a merging of wind and magnetic flux. Those who have heard it describe something else, a chord of impossible beauty, too pure to be chance. If Atlantis truly lies under Antarctica, it is not merely a ruin. It is a recording, an archive of sound and geometry frozen in crystal. It waits, patient as eternity, for a civilization capable of hearing it again. And maybe that is what all our searching has been for, not to uncover the city, but to remember the frequency that once held the world in balance. When that day comes, when the resonance returns, the ice may not melt with violence, but with understanding. Until then, the silence endures, vast and alive, the deepest voice on earth whispering through its own stillness. It begins, as it often does in the world's oldest myths, with light. Light that emerged from darkness, and darkness that swallowed light again. The ancients told it in symbols because the memory was too vast for words. Civilizations rise, the stars shift, the poles wander, and something inside the earth turns over, like a sleeping animal changing position in its dream. To stand in Antarctica, under its endless twilight, is to feel that motion still, the quiet, patient heave of a planet remembering. It is not the end of the world that haunts this place, but the recurrence of beginnings. The ice holds them all, each era layered upon the last like the rings of a buried cathedral. When researchers drill deep into the ice cores, they sometimes extract air older than language itself. Tiny bubbles of atmosphere sealed before the dawn of recorded time. Within them, the ratios of carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen speak in the language of epochs. They reveal sudden shifts, periods when the planet's temperature leaped as if jolted by an unseen hand. Every 12,000 years or so, the pattern repeats. The Younger Dryas was one such convulsion. There were others before it, stretching back into geological memory. To the modern scientist, these are cycles of orbital mechanics, the precession of the equinoxes, the tilt of the Earth. But to ancient eyes, perhaps eyes that once watched the same aurora from cities now lost, it might have felt like the sky itself collapsing. And if a civilization had risen in that earlier warmth, if its knowledge had reached too far into the fabric of the world, then perhaps the cataclysm was not accident, but correction. The more we uncover about the planet's past, the more it feels less like a linear history and more like a breathing organism. Mass extinctions, magnetic reversals, sudden leaps in evolution, all pulse like the heartbeats of a single being. Antarctica, as the southern pole, is the anchor of that rhythm. Its magnetic core aligns the field that shields every living thing from cosmic radiation. When that field weakens, chaos follows. Compasses spin, species migrate, climates shift, and memory, the deep genetic memory of the Earth, rearranges itself. What we call myth might simply be the nervous system of the planet, translating magnetic trauma into stories humans can bear. The Sumerians called the Old World Eridu, the first city, built by gods who came from the sea. The Greeks called it Atlantis. The Hindus named it Shveta Dvipa, the White Island of the north, or perhaps the south, for direction loses meaning at the poles. The Norse sagas spoke of Hyperborea, a luminous land beyond the winds where the sun never set. In all these myths, a radiant civilization stood at the edge of the world, ruled by wisdom, undone by pride, and buried under ice or ocean. Whether the names refer to the same place or to many echoes of the same fall, the pattern is unmistakable. We are haunted not by one lost world, but by the memory of the Earth resetting itself again and again, each time erasing the evidence but leaving the ache. In 2019, European Space Agency satellites detected something remarkable: a massive thermal anomaly beneath the ice near the South Pole, spreading over 200 kilometers. The heat source could not be explained by volcanic activity alone. It radiated evenly, as though emanating from a uniform surface, perhaps metallic, perhaps engineered. The official explanation was a subglacial mantle plume, a pocket of magma trapped between tectonic layers. Yet the shape was too precise, the temperature gradient too consistent. If it were a natural formation, it would be the most symmetrical one ever recorded. If not, then something vast, something built, still radiates warmth after uncountable ages. Rumors followed, as they always do. That scientists drilling near the site lost contact with their instruments, that magnetic interference disabled their GPS, that strange rhythmic pulses were detected in the ionosphere above the coordinates, lasting for several minutes before fading into background noise. None of these claims were officially confirmed, but all of them share a peculiar coherence, as though fragments of one truth had been scattered across cautious lips. The deeper question is not whether such a structure exists, but whether humanity is ready to acknowledge it. For what would it mean to admit that beneath our feet, beneath our science, lies something older than civilization, older perhaps than our species? Some say the answers lie in the fossils, those quiet witnesses of forgotten climates. In the Transantarctic mountains, paleontologists uncovered remains of an ancient forest. Roots still coiled in the soil, leaves turned to stone, yet perfectly preserved. Among them were imprints of cycads and ginkgos, plants that thrive only in warm, humid regions. The dating suggests they lived here within the last few million years, but the fossilized pollen carries an even more startling secret. It contains traces of flowering species that should not have existed at that latitude. Either the poles were once temperate much more recently than we believe, or those species were carried here from somewhere else. And if they were carried, by what hands? Ancient legends from across the world speak of beings who seeded life after the flood, gods who brought not only wisdom but vegetation, medicine, and art. In Sumerian myth, Enki and his companions sailed in vessels of light, bringing reeds and grains to restore the earth. The Mayans tell of Itzamna, who carried seeds from the heavens. The Egyptians revered Osiris, lord of regeneration, who taught agriculture and measured the floods. Each tale begins after destruction, as though a remnant returned from elsewhere to rekindle what had been lost. Could these stories describe not divine intervention, but migration, from a refuge preserved through cataclysm, perhaps in the only place untouched by floodwaters, the frozen heights of the south? If that were true, then Antarctica is not the tomb of Atlantis, but its ark. Beneath its glaciers, the genetic archive of a world before the flood could still sleep intact. Deep within Lake Vostok, isolated for millions of years, microbial life persists under pressure and darkness, adapting to extremes no surface organism could endure. Geneticists speculate that such organisms may retain ancestral DNA sequences shared with early terrestrial life, ancient blueprints of evolution. To some, this suggests that Antarctica might hold not only the remnants of a lost civilization, but the key to the very origin of life's resilience. The same ice that buries also preserves. What froze one world may yet revive another. Yet, for all our probes and satellites, there is a strange reluctance to look too closely. In 2016, Google Earth users noticed rectangular blurs covering certain areas of the continent, regions where radar data should have been publicly available. When questioned, agencies cited data corruption and security reasons. No official explanation satisfied the curiosity. It is as if parts of the map have been deliberately veiled, like the censored fragments of an ancient text. What is being protected? Fossil fuel reserves? Military installations? Or something more profound, something that would upend every narrative of human origin? The Treaty of 1959 still forbids any territorial claims or resource extraction. But treaties are rarely written to protect emptiness. They protect what matters. There are those who believe that under the thickest ice, deep caverns remain hollow, warmed by geothermal heat and ancient technology. Subglacial radar has recorded voids so large they could contain mountains. In one such region, near Dome Sea, a sonar survey revealed a hollow chamber extending more than 6 miles downward, filled with warmer air. Some hypothesize it as a volcanic vent. Others suspect it may be an ancient structure, an archive, perhaps, built to withstand the flood of time. If this is true, then the Earth itself may be the museum of its own forgotten civilizations, its memory entombed in crystal until we learn again how to read it. The notion that humanity has risen and fallen in cycles is older than history. Hindu cosmology describes yugas, ages of light and darkness repeating endlessly. The Greeks spoke of the great year, the procession of the equinoxes through 12 ages, each ending in fire or flood. The Mayans counted world ages by suns, each destroyed and renewed. Even modern physics, with its theories of entropy and cosmic recurrence, echoes the same truth, that creation is not a straight line, but a circle drawn through time. Perhaps Atlantis was not a single place or moment, but a recurring state, a balance between knowledge and humility that, when broken, collapses under its own gravity. Antarctica's ice, then, would be the white veil draped over that recurring wound. To gaze at the satellite images of the continent is to feel a kind of vertigo. The shapes beneath the ice, pyramids, domes, linear ridges, seem almost deliberate, like the skeleton of a world turned to glass. Whether they are natural or not hardly matters. What matters is the intuition they provoke. Something about the geometry of Antarctica feels human, even divine, as if the Earth herself once practiced architecture. The idea is absurd, and yet the mind refuses to dismiss it. The symmetry is too elegant, the silence too articulate. It is a silence that speaks. Every culture that remembers Atlantis also remembers sound, the hum, the song, the resonance of creation. In Egypt, the god Thoth spoke of the word that built the world. In the East, the syllable Om contains the vibration of all things. The Bible calls it, "Let there be light," the utterance that formed existence. If the ancients understood that sound could shape matter, then perhaps their monuments, their temples, and even their cities were built as instruments. Antarctica might be the final movement of that music, frozen mid-note, waiting for the world to learn its key again. The aurora that dances above the pole could be the visual echo of that frequency. Light turned into sound, color turned into memory. And so the mystery endures, not because we lack evidence, but because evidence itself resists coherence. The facts align like constellations, beautiful, remote, incomplete. Somewhere among them lies the truth, that the Earth is older than we imagine, that civilization is cyclical, that Antarctica is not an end, but an intermission. Beneath its ice, the pulse of a forgotten age still beats faintly, waiting for the warmth of understanding to set it free. Perhaps, when the next cycle begins, the ice will melt and the old world will rise again, not as a warning, but as a mirror. For now the ice remains, a white shroud stretched over the bones of history. The wind moves across it with the patience of centuries, carving invisible runes in the snow. Above, the stars wheel slowly, completing the same circle they have traced since before Atlantis fell. The universe hums quietly, and the continent listens, unmoving, holding its breath. It is said that those who spend enough time there begin to hear it, the faint vibration beneath the silence, a low note that seems to come from the center of the world. Perhaps that is the heartbeat of the past, still alive, still waiting. The song of Atlantis, frozen in the breath of Antarctica. The further one looks into the mystery of Antarctica, the more it resembles a mirror, reflecting not only the past but the mind of the observer. Every discovery becomes a Rorschach of civilization's longing, every anomaly a symbol of what humanity fears or hopes to find beneath its own history. To the scientist, the ice is a record of climate. To the mystic, it is the frozen veil between worlds. To the dreamer, it is the lost continent of Atlantis. But perhaps it is all of these at once, because truth, like the continent itself, changes shape depending on how it is illuminated. The light at the pole bends differently, refracted through layers of atmosphere and myth, until one cannot tell where observation ends and revelation begins. As the 21st century deepens, so too does our technological sight. Satellites now peer through miles of ice, radar waves painting ghostly topographies of what lies beneath. What they find defies simplicity. Labyrinthine canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon, rivers flowing in total darkness, mountain ranges taller than the Alps, all unseen from the surface. It is as though a second Earth sleeps beneath the first, a negative image of the world we know. The Gumburtsev Mountains, buried under 2 miles of ice, stretch across 1,000 kilometers, complete with valleys, peaks, and possible basins of ancient lakes. They should not exist there. Their formation predates the ice sheet by millions of years. Yet their preservation is so pristine that geologists say it's as if time stopped when the first snow fell. If a civilization once thrived here before the freeze, its ruins could still be cradled among those mountains, perfectly preserved in the silence of geological stasis. One cannot dismiss the coincidences that orbit this idea. The mysterious Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, not only outlines Antarctica without ice, but places mountain ranges exactly where the Gumburtsev lie. Its coastlines are detailed with bays and river mouths that modern surveys have confirmed. When skeptics claim coincidence, they underestimate the precision of the match. How could cartographers of the early 16th century know what was hidden under 2 miles of ice? Unless, of course, they were copying from much older sources, maps of a world before the Cataclysm, inherited through civilizations that barely remembered their origins. Such knowledge might have been safeguarded by the very people who fled the frozen continent, passed down in temple archives or oral codes disguised as myth. It is no coincidence that ancient traditions describe the gods as teachers of navigation, geometry, and the stars. The Polynesians charted entire oceans with no instruments, guided by the rhythm of waves and the movement of constellations. The Egyptians oriented their temples with astronomical precision. The Maya tracked celestial cycles over thousands of years. Everywhere, humanity's first great achievements seem to be acts of remembering rather than invention, as though some forgotten blueprint still echoed within collective memory. If an earlier civilization mapped the world, including Antarctica, before the last polar shift, its remnants might survive not in ruins, but in ratios, encoded in the proportions of sacred architecture and mythological symmetry. This hidden geometry has long haunted the fringes of scholarship. The golden ratio, F, recurs in the dimensions of temples, pyramids, and even planetary orbits. When measured across continents, ancient monuments appear linked by common angles, all multiples of a 23.5-degree offset, the same tilt as the Earth's axis. Coincidence again, say the skeptics. Yet the numbers persist, patient as stone. Some researchers suggest these alignments are the remnants of a once unified geodetic system, a global network used to measure and balance the planet's energies. If so, Antarctica would have been its fulcrum, the still point around which the world's meridians turned. When that point froze, the entire system fell out of harmony, and humanity began its long descent into fragmented memory. Modern science is beginning, reluctantly, to brush against the edges of these ideas. In 2018, a study published in Nature revealed that Antarctica's ice sheet conceals over 400 subglacial lakes connected by vast tunnels of flowing water. These channels, maintained by geothermal heat and pressure, pulse with the rhythm of tides. Some fill and drain in perfect cycles, independent of surface climate. Seismic sensors have even recorded what appear to be harmonic tremors, vibrations repeating with mathematical regularity. The phenomenon, though unexplained, mirrors natural resonance frequencies observed in crystal lattices and engineered acoustic systems. If such harmony exists in nature, it raises an uncomfortable question. Is the planet itself an instrument, and Antarctica its deepest note? Throughout history, seekers have spoken of a central vibration, the Om, the word, the primordial tone from which creation unfolds. In modern physics, everything is vibration. Matter itself is but energy oscillating at specific frequencies. The ancients may have known this intuitively, constructing monuments that amplified those resonances to heal, to communicate, or to align consciousness with the Earth's pulse. The continent beneath the ice could have been the heart of that system, a resonant node connecting heaven and earth through geometry, sound, and light. When it froze, the harmony shattered, and civilization's music fell silent. What remains are faint echoes, architectural harmonics, mythic memories, and the inexplicable pull humanity feels toward lost origins. It is not difficult to imagine the moment it ended. A tremor beneath the sea, the sky turning red with falling stars, a wall of water devouring the horizon, ice spreading over fields of green, cities entombed beneath snow. The survivors scattering across the globe, carrying fragments of knowledge like embers. Some built new temples, others preserved the memory as myth. Millennia later, we stand at the other end of that cycle, staring at satellite maps of Antarctica and feeling the same unease. The world is warming again. The poles are shifting. Coastlines are drowning. Perhaps we are not discovering Atlantis at all. Perhaps we are repeating it. Every new expedition to the continent seems to stumble upon anomalies that defy explanation. In 2020, a radar array operating in Queen Maud Land detected vertical structures beneath the ice, rows of objects, uniform in spacing, extending for miles. Their depth suggested antiquity, their alignment precision. The data was quietly retracted a few months later, cited as instrumental error. But those who analyzed the raw scans before their removal described patterns that resembled pillars or columns. It might have been a trick of echo and shadow, or it might have been architecture frozen in stone. Either way, the pattern was too deliberate to ignore. When the mind contemplates what such discovery would mean, a deeper unease emerges. It is not only history that would be rewritten, but identity. Everything we think we know about ourselves, our evolution, our timeline, our uniqueness, would fracture. We would be forced to confront the possibility that civilization is not humanity's invention, but inheritance. The fear of that revelation may explain the silence, the secrecy, the treaties that forbid excavation. Perhaps some truths are too immense to be released without consequence. To know that we are not the first might awaken humility or madness. The patterns of myth suggest that each age ends when pride outpaces wisdom. In every flood story, humanity rises too high, reaches for the heavens, and is cast down. The Atlanteans built machines that drew power from the Earth's core, harnessing energies they did not fully understand. Some traditions call it fire, others crystal light. When their frequency faltered, the resonance turned upon them, collapsing their world. Whether literal or allegorical, the story feels like prophecy. We too manipulate forces beyond comprehension, atomic fire, artificial intelligence, geoengineering, and call it progress. The ice that conceals Atlantis may yet become our mirror, showing us what happens when civilization forgets its own vibration. Still, the mystery persists not in the evidence, but in the feeling. Those who have walked upon the polar plateau describe a presence, neither malevolent nor benign, simply vast. The sky there is too large, the silence too absolute. Time stretches until it feels infinite, and beneath that infinity, something hums. Pilots report magnetic interference, instruments flickering as if brushing against invisible currents. Some claim to have seen lights beneath the ice, soft glows moving slowly, pulsing like the heartbeat of a sleeping organism. The official explanations vary: bioluminescent algae, reflections of aurora, optical illusions. But every explanation feels smaller than the experience itself. To be there is to stand on the skin of something alive. In one sense, Antarctica is not the past but the future. The ice that locks its secrets away is melting faster each year. Lakes expand, glaciers fracture, and what was buried begins to stir. Satellites now detect methane plumes rising from ancient sediments, gases trapped since the last cataclysm. Within them may be spores, microbes, perhaps even viral codes from an epoch long erased. The planet is thawing its memory, and we do not yet understand the consequences. When that memory awakens fully, it may not reveal a lost city, but an older intelligence, one that has always spoken through tectonics, magnetism, and storm. There are moments when imagination feels closer to truth than data. Picture it. Beneath the ice, a vast structure of crystal and stone, humming faintly with the resonance of a forgotten science. Its corridors are filled not with skeletons but with light, patterns that record history in frequency rather than script. Machines slumber, powered by geothermal heat, still responding to the magnetic breath of the planet. When the poles shift again, when the resonance stabilizes, it will awaken, not as ruin, but as archive. And in that moment, humanity will face its reflection in the ice and recognize itself for what it is, not the first, not the last, but the current verse in a repeating song. Night at the pole has no true darkness. The aurora flickers against the endless snowfields, painting the silence in green and violet. The wind moves like the ocean, whispering through frozen waves. Somewhere far below, in the depths where no light has ever touched, the temperature rises slightly, a slow pulse of warmth traveling through ancient rock. It could be magma. It could be memory. Perhaps, in a way, they are the same thing. The earth remembering its own fire. And above it all, humanity waits, listening to the hum that might once have been Atlantis, or might be the planet itself, singing to us through the ice, reminding us that everything forgotten is only waiting to be heard again. The longer the ice remains, the louder its silence becomes. It is not the silence of emptiness, but of density, of meaning compressed until it can no longer move. Antarctica is a cathedral of that silence, and every flake that falls upon it adds another syllable to an unending prayer. Those who cross its white horizon speak of feeling watched, not by eyes, but by memory itself. It is as though the continent recognizes those who trespass upon its skin. For centuries, humanity has circled it like moths around a candle, drawn, repelled, hypnotized by the same question that haunted the ancients: what lies beneath? In the early decades of the 21st century, our curiosity sharpened into obsession. Each year brought new expeditions, new sensors, new data sets, and with them, new paradoxes. In 2024, an international research team drilling into the Aurora Subglacial Basin recovered sediment layers containing traces of marine plankton dated to only 120,000 years ago. This was long after Antarctica was believed to be locked in its current frozen state. The implications were seismic. Within human prehistory, parts of the continent may have thawed enough to host open seas, rivers, even forests. Such warmth could not have occurred without a major shift in the planet's tilt or orbit. And if the world had changed that drastically once, it could again. Perhaps that is why so many flood myths speak of sudden reversals, the sea rising where land once stood, ice swallowing what was fertile. The earth remembers its own transformations through us, repeating the story until we listen. Scientists, careful with their words, call it rapid deglaciation events. But myth is less cautious. In Plato's dialogues, the priests of Sais told Solon that Atlantis fell in a single day and night of misfortune. Geological records suggest the younger Dryas ended in a burst of heat so intense that it could have melted miles of ice in decades. What the ancients called the wrath of the gods might have been nothing more, or nothing less, than the planet rebalancing itself. If an advanced culture had existed in that warming window, its erasure would have been instant. Its cities, monuments, and technologies would not have decayed. They would have been entombed, perfectly sealed, beneath the weight of returning cold. The idea of lost civilizations buried under ice was once the domain of mystics and fantasists. Yet, the boundary between speculation and science has thinned. In 2025, satellite-based gravimetric mapping revealed a network of massive voids beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet, some spanning hundreds of miles. Officially, these were labeled basal canyons, carved by subglacial rivers. Unofficially, the data showed geometric regularity, edges too straight, angles too consistent. The largest of these voids, located near Princess Elizabeth Land, displayed hexagonal symmetry across its central basin. To a geologist, it might be coincidence. To an architect, it looks deliberate. But in Antarctica, nothing can be confirmed. The treaty forbids intrusive exploration. So the anomalies remain untouched, suspended between hypothesis and heresy. If one peers beyond the political frost, a pattern begins to emerge. For all our denial, we have already glimpsed the impossible. The pyramidal peaks of the Ellsworth Range rising in precise triads from the snow. The radar returns from Dome Sea, showing concentric structures echoing Plato's description of Atlantis. The electromagnetic hotspots beneath Lake Vostok radiating in rhythmic intervals. Each piece alone can be explained away, but together they hum like chords in a forgotten song. The melody is faint but unmistakable. It is the sound of something that once was, and perhaps still is, breathing beneath the ice. Throughout history, those who have sought forbidden knowledge have paid a price. The explorers who vanished in white storms. The researchers whose data was classified before publication. The whistleblowers whose warnings faded into the noise of conspiracy. It is tempting to dismiss them all as delusional, yet delusion does not leave behind consistent coordinates, repeating signals, or identical testimonies across generations. When patterns persist through time and disbelief, it may be the disbelief that requires scrutiny. Why does the idea of a buried past disturb us so deeply? Perhaps because it suggests that we are not the masters of our timeline, but its inheritors. To find Atlantis under the ice is to confront our own fragility, to admit that progress is reversible, that civilization is only a warm pause between glaciations. In 1956, Admiral Byrd, long after his public expeditions had ended, was reported to have given a cryptic speech at a private gathering. "The poles," he said, "are the key to everything." No transcript survives, but the phrase lingers, repeated in obscure publications and declassified fragments. The key to what? The obvious answer is geology, but those who knew Byrd describe a man obsessed with something deeper. His private writings, if authentic, speak of magnetic gateways and hollow resonances within the earth. Whether poetic metaphor or literal belief, his words reflect a truth that resonates with both science and myth. The poles are the planet's memory banks. They store the charge of its consciousness, and when that charge shifts, the world transforms. Modern measurements confirm that the South Magnetic Pole is migrating faster than ever recorded. It drifts toward the Indian Ocean at dozens of kilometers per year, as if tugged by an unseen force. The magnetic field weakens, auroras grow stronger, compasses falter. Some physicists whisper of an impending geomagnetic reversal, a flip of polarity that occurs, on average, every 500,000 years. If it happens within our lifetime, the consequences would be immense. Satellites disabled, power grids fried, climates destabilized. But there is another possibility, rarely discussed, that such reversals are not random but rhythmic, and that they coincide with great cultural and biological resets. In that sense, the ice might not simply melt, it might awaken. What would awakening look like? Perhaps not apocalypse, but revelation. The melting already exposes relics of the past, meteorites, forests, fossils of unknown creatures. If a city lies below, its emergence would rewrite every sacred and scientific text alike. Yet even without proof, the symbolic truth is enough. Atlantis, whether myth or memory, mirrors the human condition. We build, we rise, we forget, we repeat. The ice is not our enemy but our teacher, showing us that permanence is an illusion, that all creation eventually sleeps. Across the ages, mystics have spoken of the inner sun, a source of radiant consciousness hidden within the earth. In esoteric traditions, the poles are its gateways, points where matter and spirit meet. If one takes that metaphor seriously, Antarctica could be seen not as a dead end, but a threshold. The legends of Shambhala, Agartha, and the Hollow Earth may have emerged from fragmented memories of subterranean sanctuaries, safe havens built to preserve knowledge through planetary catastrophe. Such places might still exist, sealed by ice and time, their light reduced to a hum in the planet's core. Perhaps that is what explorers feel when they speak of being watched, not an external presence, but the echo of consciousness that once filled these chambers. Consider how the myths converge. The Egyptians believed the soul's journey after death led it to the hidden chamber beneath the pole of the world. The Mayans described the underworld Xibalba as the place of ice and mirrors. Tibetan texts speak of an entrance to Shambhala at the southern snows. Even Christianity preserves the echo, the notion of a descent into the earth before resurrection. In each story, salvation lies beneath, not above. Maybe that is what Antarctica represents, the descent before renewal, the womb of the next world gestating under the frost. If that interpretation feels too mystical, look again through the lens of science. Deep within the continent's crust lies a mantle anomaly, hotter than surrounding rock, circular, and inexplicably stable. Computer models show it focusing heat upward, maintaining pockets of liquid water that should have frozen millions of years ago. It behaves like a heartbeat, pulsing geothermal energy in cycles that match the planet's magnetic fluctuations. It is tempting to think of this as coincidence, but the human mind recognizes rhythm instinctively. We feel it in our blood, our tides, our seasons. If the Earth itself breathes, then Antarctica is where its breath condenses, visible, measurable, undeniable. Perhaps that is why, despite all treaties, all warnings, all prohibitions, humanity keeps returning. Each generation sends new machines, new eyes, new questions into the white abyss. We cannot help ourselves. There is something in the human spirit that hungers for the forgotten. The more the continent resists, the more we pursue. And maybe that is the point. The ice is not merely guarding a secret, it is teaching patience, testing whether we are ready to understand what lies beneath. Because whatever sleeps there, whether city or consciousness, will not reveal itself to arrogance. It waits for humility, for stillness, for a civilization quiet enough to listen instead of conquer. Night comes quickly in the southern latitudes, swallowing the horizon in blue fire. The aurora ripples, and the snow reflects it like glass. Somewhere far below, the hum continues, steady, patient, older than any empire. Those who have heard it describe it as both terrifying and beautiful, like standing inside the heartbeat of God. Maybe that is all Antarctica ever was. The place where the Earth's voice is loud enough to be heard. And perhaps, When the last of the ice melts and the world floods again, that voice will rise with the water, whispering through the ruins of our cities, reminding us that we too are temporary, and that the story of Atlantis is not a memory. It is a prophecy we are already fulfilling. It is said that every civilization leaves behind two traces, what it built and what it feared. The ruins we find are the easier part. Stones endure. What is harder to see are the fears, the shadows of knowledge too dangerous to survive. Antarctica may be both. The monument of an age that understood too much and the vault of what it chose to hide. Each generation of explorers believes it approaches revelation, but the closer one gets to the pole, the more everything dissolves into silence and light. The horizon folds upon itself, the compass spins, the wind erases footprints as quickly as they are made. It is as if the continent defends itself, not with hostility, but with indifference, as though time itself refuses entry. Perhaps that is why so many myths describe the end of the world not as destruction, but as forgetting. Atlantis did not vanish. Humanity simply forgot how to see it. In that sense, Antarctica is less a place than a condition of blindness, the point where collective memory freezes into disbelief. But even the coldest amnesia cracks under warmth, and the ice is melting. What is returning is not only water, but memory, ancient, luminous, and disquieting. Recent expeditions reveal signs that the ice is melting from below as much as from above. Thermal scans show vast plumes of heat rising through the bedrock, too evenly distributed to be volcanic. Some scientists propose mantle anomalies, others suspect radioactive decay. Yet a few whisper about something far older, an energy source buried since the last cataclysm, now stirring again. The heat radiates in pulses, following no known geological rhythm. In the data, there is a pattern, an oscillation around 8 Hz, almost identical to the frequency of the Earth's natural resonance and to the human alpha brainwave. Coincidence, perhaps, or conversation. If it is conversation, who is speaking? The thought feels absurd, and yet the idea will not leave. In the deepest chambers of the mind, beneath skepticism and science, there remains a primitive recognition that the earth is not silent. The ancients called it Gaia, Pachamama, Geb, the living world whose pulse guided all things. If Atlantis once existed, it might have been less a kingdom than a dialogue, a harmony between humanity and planet. When that harmony fractured, through hubris, greed, or imbalance, the dialogue ended, and the voice fell quiet. The ice is its echo, the residue of interrupted speech. To modern ears, such ideas sound romantic, but fragments of them remain encoded in physics. Quantum theorists describe the universe as a field of interwoven vibrations, where matter is only condensed frequency. Under this lens, consciousness itself may be a resonance phenomenon, a byproduct of synchronization between neural waves and planetary rhythms. If an ancient civilization learned to tune that resonance, to think and build in unison with the Earth, then its technology would not resemble ours. It would not rely on extraction or combustion, but on resonance and geometry. The so-called Atlantean crystals of myth might not have been magical stones, but resonant devices. Massive oscillators designed to harmonize energy fields across continents. If such a system ever existed, its collapse could have disrupted the planet's magnetic balance, triggering quakes, floods, and the sudden freezing that entombed their cities. Every legend hints at this same paradox, knowledge as salvation and ruin. The Sumerians warned of gods who taught forbidden crafts. The Hebrews spoke of the Tower of Babel, built to reach heaven and shattered by confusion. The Greeks told of Prometheus, who stole fire and was punished for eternity. Always the same arc: enlightenment followed by silence. It is not hard to see Antarctica as the latest monument in that cycle. A library turned to ice, where every book is locked, every question sealed beneath 1,000,000 years of frost. What if, somewhere under that frozen library, memory survived intact? There are rumors, always rumors, of vaults detected by ground-penetrating radar, perfectly cubic anomalies miles below the surface. Some researchers say they are air pockets, others basalt formations. Yet their internal echo returns metallic, as if the waves are striking hollow walls. Access is impossible, of course. The treaty forbids deep excavation without unanimous consent of all signatory nations, a unanimity that never arrives. And so the rumor remains a rumor, looping endlessly through the circuits of imagination. But imagination has its own gravity. It draws the mind toward possibility until disbelief begins to feel less like reason and more like fear. In 2026, a classified satellite mission known unofficially as Polaris 9 scanned the polar regions with hyperspectral sensors. Leaked data, if authentic, showed something extraordinary. Beneath several miles of ice near Dome Argus, a geometric heat signature spanning more than 20 kilometers, radiating in concentric rings. The image resembled not a natural formation, but an engineered system, something vast, symmetrical, and still warm. Within weeks, the data vanished from public servers. The scientists involved were reassigned. Officially, Polaris 9 never existed. But the few who saw the image before its deletion describe it in near-religious tones, as though it had revealed the architecture of myth itself. The possibility that Antarctica hides not ruins but functioning systems raises questions too large for comfort. If a power source still operates there, who or what maintains it? Could it be automated, self-sustaining, governed by principles beyond our physics? Some propose it is a geothermal resonance device designed to stabilize planetary frequency. Others think it a fail-safe, a mechanism meant to reboot ecosystems after catastrophe. The more radical theories imagine it as an archive of consciousness itself, a crystalline network storing the memory of an entire age, waiting for alignment to awaken. Whichever version one entertains, the implication is the same. Atlantis may not be a corpse, but a sleeper. There are precedents for such endurance. Bacteria have been revived from ice 500,000 years old, spores reanimated from amber, seeds sprouting after tens of millennia in permafrost. If life itself can wait that long, perhaps so can mind. The concept of stored consciousness once belonged to mystics, yet neuroscience now experiments with digital preservation, mapping memory into code. The ancients may have achieved something similar through matter rather than machine, embedding awareness in crystal matrices. Some traditions call them the record keepers, others the watchers. Their monuments were not messages but receivers, waiting for resonance with a future intelligence capable of hearing them. Perhaps that is why we feel such inexplicable magnetism toward the poles. The planet may be calling us back, the same way a dream calls to be remembered. To those who fear this thought, there is comfort in science's silence. Data can be controlled, anomalies dismissed. But silence does not erase truth. it only delays it. The ice continues to thin, revealing strata of history like pages of a book thawing open. Fossilized coral reefs appear at impossible latitudes. Ancient riverbeds snake beneath glaciers. Meteorites embedded in ice layers show evidence of melting from below, as if the continent breathes heat in cycles. The picture that emerges is not of static cold, but of pulsation. Antarctica as living organism, its heartbeat slow but steady. And yet there is tenderness in this revelation. The continent does not threaten. It endures. It keeps vigil over everything humanity has forgotten, waiting without anger, without haste. Perhaps that patience is its final lesson. For all our urgency, the earth moves on timescales that make us children. The rise and fall of civilizations are but the flicker of aurora against its sky. The ice is not punishment, but pause, a long inhalation before the next exhalation of creation. When the aurora dances above the South Pole, satellites record electromagnetic surges strong enough to interfere with communication. But those who have seen it in person describe something no instrument can capture. The air itself seems to sing, faintly but unmistakably, a harmony woven through the wind. It vibrates in the chest more than in the ears, like the echo of a half-remembered lullaby. Some dismiss it as imagination. Others believe it is the voice of the earth, tuning itself back to equilibrium. Either way, it feels like home, the sound of belonging to something larger than memory. Perhaps that is the secret Atlantis truly held, not technology or empire, but communion. The understanding that knowledge divorced from reverence leads only to ice. Every civilization that forgets this balance freezes, literally or metaphorically, until humility returns warmth to its heart. We, standing at the threshold of another climatic shift, repeat the same dance with our machines, our oceans, our skies. The irony is exquisite. We search for Atlantis beneath the melting ice while becoming it ourselves. And yet, beneath the melancholy, there is hope. If the past can be preserved for 12,000 years beneath miles of snow, then nothing is ever truly lost. The next age will find us, as we now search for those before us. They will read our traces, the satellites, the glass, the bones, and wonder what we knew, what we feared, what we hid. Maybe they will uncover the vaults we dared not open. Maybe they will hear the hum and understand that it wasn't warning but invitation. The planet doesn't destroy, it transforms. Atlantis may rise not as a city, but as a consciousness reawakened through us, remembering itself in new form. Night never truly ends at the pole. It only fades into another kind of light. The snow glows blue, the air brittle with sound. Somewhere deep below, the ancient heat pulses, the same rhythm that has carried through extinction after extinction. It is neither mercy nor wrath, only continuity. And if one listens long enough, the difference between myth and science disappears. There is only the hum and the long, patient breath of the world turning beneath it. Every age believes itself to stand at the center of history, yet in truth, we hover on the thin ice between past and recurrence. The story of Atlantis, if it ever existed, is not buried in stone but in rhythm, the tempo of creation, collapse, and rebirth. Nowhere does that rhythm speak more clearly than in Antarctica, the frozen metronome of the planet. With each rise and fall of global temperature, each drift of magnetic fields, the continent breathes in its slow way. What it exhales, we call myth. What it withholds, we call mystery. Humanity listens, not yet fluent in the language of glaciers, translating fragments into prophecy. The deeper we listen, the more the boundary between imagination and evidence dissolves, until every theory sounds like memory trying to remember itself. Perhaps that is why those who visit the South Pole describe a strange disorientation, not from the cold or the endless white, but from time itself. There, one stands outside the usual order of day and night, season and shadow. Clocks lose meaning. Distance becomes abstract. It is as if the planet's memory field is exposed, unshielded by distraction. Some researchers have confessed to hallucinations, shapes glimpsed in the snow, voices whispering at the edge of hearing, flashes of light beneath their eyelids when they close them to sleep. Official reports blame fatigue, hypoxia, or isolation. Yet the symptoms are uncannily consistent, echoing the polar madness documented in early expeditions. Maybe it is not madness but proximity, to something vast, something remembering itself through those who dare to listen too long. If Atlantis lies beneath the ice, then perhaps it is not a city but an interface, a point of contact between consciousness and geology. For millennia, mystics have insisted that the Earth itself possesses awareness, a vast neural network of magnetic and crystalline pathways storing energy and information. Science, ever cautious, has begun to stumble toward the same conclusion. Studies of piezoelectricity in quartz, of signal resonance in rock formations, of global electromagnetic coherence all hint at the same possibility. That memory is not exclusive to biology. The planet may store thought the way it stores fossils, in pressure, in heat, in vibration. If so, then Antarctica's crystalline crust could hold the residue of an earlier intelligence, encoded not in symbols, but in harmonics. In 2027, a seismic monitoring project near the Ameri ice shelf recorded something inexplicable. A low-frequency signal repeating every 108 minutes, strong enough to be detected halfway across the world. It was not seismic in nature, nor atmospheric, nor artificial. It resonated at a wavelength corresponding almost perfectly to the circumference of the Earth. For several weeks it continued, then vanished without explanation. Some proposed that it was an artifact of the instruments. Others compared it to the Schumann resonance, the planet's natural electromagnetic heartbeat. But the signal carried structure, subtle variations in amplitude that formed ratios resembling musical intervals. To a geophysicist, this was noise. To a historian of myth, it was a voice. Voices have always emerged from the edges of human understanding. The oracle of Delphi spoke through vapors rising from the earth. The prophets of the Andes listened to wind in mountain caverns. The Inuits say the ice sings to those who respect it. Even the biblical still small voice might have been the resonance of wind across stone. Perhaps what the ancients called gods were not external beings, but harmonics, frequencies of consciousness amplified through the planet's own geometry. If a civilization once learned to tune into those frequencies, it might have achieved feats we now call impossible. Stone levitation, energy transmission, even communication without language, all are conceivable when matter and mind vibrate in harmony. What we call miracles might have been physics in tune with memory, yet every harmony risks dissonance. If Atlantis fell because it disrupted the Earth's frequency, then the poles would have been the first to react. Magnetic fields collapse, climates invert, tectonic plates convulse. the myth of divine punishment may simply describe planetary feedback, the self-correcting pulse of a living world. When balance breaks, the system resets. In that sense, Atlantis was not destroyed. It was absorbed, restructured into the Earth's deeper memory. Its ruins are not architecture, but vibration. Frozen waves of energy, the fossilized echoes of a civilization's final breath. There are moments when data and legend overlap too precisely to ignore. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe the vimanas, vehicles that emitted a melodic thunder and traveled through the sky on currents of light. Native Australian stories tell of sky serpents that sang the land into being. And Plato wrote that the Atlanteans commanded the forces between heaven and earth. Each of these, in its own language, describes mastery of resonance, a technology of sound and light. The same patterns appear in Antarctica's current anomalies, rhythmic magnetic pulses, symmetrical heat plumes, harmonic tremors beneath the glaciers. Perhaps what we are detecting are not relics, but remnants of that technology, still echoing after eons, like the ring of a struck bell. If that is true, then the continent is less a graveyard than an instrument still vibrating. The Earth hums at frequencies between 7 and 30 hertz. The human brain oscillates within the same range. Our ancestors may have built monuments to amplify those harmonics, pyramids, stone circles, temples aligned with the stars, all tuning forks for consciousness. Atlantis, as the archetype of perfect resonance, represents the point at which humanity and planet were one instrument. When that synchronization failed, dissonance shattered the world. And now, as climate and magnetism shift once more, the symphony begins again, soft at first, then rising. The question is not whether Atlantis will return, but whether we will hear its music before it crescendos into silence. The idea that the planet holds memory may sound poetic, but evidence accumulates. Magnetic rocks remember the direction and intensity of the field at their formation, allowing scientists to map pole reversals across deep time. Ice cores preserve atmospheres of vanished worlds. Fossils crystallize moments of extinction. Why should human consciousness be any different? Perhaps it, too, leaves imprints, quantum scars impressed upon the planet's field. In this light, reincarnation may not be metaphysical, but physical, the recycling of thought itself through magnetic resonance. Each generation inherits not only DNA, but the subtle frequencies of everything that has ever lived. We are, quite literally, the dreams of the dead replaying themselves in new flesh. If Antarctica is the planet's memory core, then the melting we witness today might be its act of remembering. As the ice recedes, the old data surfaces, ancient forests, meteorite fragments, even microbes awakening after 1,000,000 years. Some of these microbes emit faint bioluminescence, glowing blue under ultraviolet light. In remote research footage, the effect is mesmerizing. Veins of ghostly light pulsing under translucent ice, like neurons firing in a brain. The scientists describe it as fluorescence caused by mineral reactions. Yet one cannot help but wonder, what if this is how the planet dreams, through light beneath its own skin? Dreams recur in cycles, and so do ages. The Mayans counted worlds by suns, the Hindus by yugas, the Greeks by metals. Each cycle begins in gold and ends in iron, then begins anew. By every ancient measure, we now stand at the turning. The ice melts, the poles wander, storms grow wild, and the heavens themselves seem to shift. It is tempting to call it coincidence, yet the symmetry is perfect. The same auroras that once illuminated the fall of the old world now blaze above the birth of the next. Humanity, armed with machines and satellites, stands once again before the gate of knowledge, tempted to open what it barely understands. If the myths are true, this is the moment when the song must be sung correctly, or not at all. Perhaps that is the deeper lesson buried beneath the snow, that the earth doesn't punish, it harmonizes. When imbalance grows too loud, the melody resets. The flood is not wrath, but restoration. The ice is not death, but preservation. What sleeps beneath Antarctica is not a warning, but a promise, that memory endures, that wisdom waits. Atlantis may rise again, but not as marble and metal. It may return as awareness, as the rediscovery of resonance between humanity and the living world. Its city walls might be built not of stone, but of understanding. Still, there is unease in knowing that we are part of a cycle we cannot control. The glaciers retreat, revealing shapes that look disturbingly deliberate, ridges forming concentric ovals, valleys aligning with star paths long forgotten. We tell ourselves they are accidents of erosion, yet they feel designed. And maybe they are, by nature, by consciousness, by something older than both. The line between intention and inevitability is thin. Even ice, given time, learns architecture. Night descends again over the polar plateau, and the aurora unfolds like a curtain drawn by invisible hands. In that spectral light, everything appears suspended. Time, gravity, even thought. The air crackles faintly with static, the residue of cosmic particles colliding with the atmosphere. Somewhere deep below, the hum continues, steady and patient, the Earth's own heartbeat echoing through its frozen veins. To listen is to remember is to awaken. Perhaps that is all Atlantis ever was, a civilization that remembered too much, too quickly, and tried to become the song instead of merely hearing it. We are the echo of that ambition, standing on the edge of ice and time, waiting for the next note to rise. And when it does, when the first true sound of the thaw reaches us, it will not be the crash of catastrophe, but the softest vibration, almost imperceptible, like the sigh of something ancient stretching after a long sleep. The ice will shift, the world will shimmer, and for an instant, the distance between myth and science will vanish. In that moment, the earth will remember its name, and we will remember ours. There is a moment in every search when discovery and reflection become indistinguishable, when the thing pursued turns its gaze back on the seeker. Antarctica has always been that mirror, dazzling and merciless, reflecting not what lies beneath, but what lies within those who try to unveil it. To look into its depths is to confront the limits of our understanding, to realize that knowledge itself may have a temperature, and that some truths only exist below freezing. For centuries we have sent ships, machines, and questions into the white abyss, hoping to uncover a forgotten world. Yet with each expedition, the mystery only multiplies. The ice does not yield, it edits. It reveals fragments just long enough for wonder, then buries them again beneath blizzards of uncertainty. And still, humanity cannot stop searching. By now, the outlines of the myth are familiar. A civilization older than history, destroyed by its own brilliance, entombed under the polar ice. To skeptics, it is fantasy. To believers, revelation. Between them lies the space where mythology and science overlap, a twilight where speculation becomes the truest form of memory. The evidence grows stranger with each passing year. Underneath more than 2 miles of ice, radar detects perfectly circular depressions hundreds of miles across, structures that mimic the geometry of sound waves frozen in matter. In some sectors, heat signatures form spirals, radiating outward as if from the epicenter of an immense release of energy. To call it coincidence is an act of faith equal to any religion. And what of the light? Astronauts aboard polar orbiting satellites report faint glows emanating from deep within the continent, luminosities that rise and fade in rhythm, unrelated to auroras or reflection. In 2028, one of those satellites malfunctioned over the South Pole, its sensors overwhelmed by a sudden surge of infrared radiation. For 7 seconds, the satellite's instruments recorded a temperature spike equivalent to a volcanic eruption, except there was no eruption. When the data was reviewed, the coordinates corresponded precisely to a gravitational anomaly previously mapped decades earlier. The report was classified. The official statement cited solar interference. But the timeline of solar activity did not match. Something beneath the ice had pulsed, once, and with purpose. Some researchers, still clinging to reason, call it tectonic pressure. Others whisper of reactivation. If the myths are true, if the Atlanteans harnessed the Earth's magnetic resonance for energy, then perhaps some remnant of that system still breathes, adjusting itself to the planet's shifting field. It might be a safeguard, a mechanism designed to regulate the world's stability, awakening when imbalance reaches a threshold. Or it might be something more intimate, a signal, an attempt to communicate. Every hum, every pulse, every shimmer in the snow could be the language of the lost, calling across millennia to their descendants who have forgotten how to listen. But listening requires stillness, and stillness has become the rarest commodity. The modern world hums louder than the planet. Our machines drown out the frequencies that once guided sailors, healers, and dreamers. Yet even now, a few claim to have heard the polar song. A deep, harmonic vibration felt more than heard, a resonance that bypasses the ear and travels straight into the bones. It emerges when the wind dies and the temperature plummets, a note so low it seems to come from the center of the world. Some record it on their instruments. Others simply stand there, paralyzed between awe and fear. One scientist wrote in her field journal, "It felt as though the Earth itself was thinking, and for a moment I understood." That sensation, the convergence of thought and landscape, may be the oldest form of worship. Long before temples, before gods, before even language, humans knelt before the rhythm of the world and called it sacred. Atlantis might have been nothing more than the culmination of that reverence, a civilization built not on conquest but on coherence, a people who heard the planet's heartbeat and shaped their lives to its cadence. If that is true, then its fall was inevitable. Harmony invites dissonance. Stillness invites movement. Perhaps they reached such alignment with nature that they triggered its self-correction. The Earth, like any living being, cannot sustain constant intensity. Even perfection must rest. The ice is that rest, the planet's long meditation after an age of brilliance. Yet rest is not death. Every fossil discovered in Antarctica tells a story of return. Forests bloom, glaciers retreat, life reclaims what was lost. The same cycle that buried Atlantis may one day unearth it again. As the ice melts, the sea rises, the magnetic field shifts, and humanity faces its own reflection in the thawing mirror. We, too, have built towers of knowledge, harnessed energies beyond comprehension, rewritten the climate for convenience. The parallels are too exact to ignore. If the ancient catastrophe was a warning, it has gone unheeded. The world changes faster than we can understand, and somewhere beneath that acceleration is the faint rhythm of recurrence, the sound of a lesson repeating itself through time. Perhaps the secret of Atlantis is not technological, but ethical. Its tragedy is not that it fell, but that it forgot its humility. Myths describe the Atlanteans as beings of immense wisdom corrupted by pride, their city of light consumed by its own glow. Pride is the one resource that never freezes. It flows like magma beneath every age, reshaping the surface of civilization again and again. To melt the ice of the past without melting the lesson within it would be to repeat the same cycle. The question is not whether we will rediscover Atlantis, but whether we can rediscover reverence. Somewhere beneath the ice, liquid water still moves, rivers flowing in darkness, lakes sealed away since before humanity existed. Within those lakes, microbes live in isolation, evolving along paths untouched by surface life. They are the Earth's time capsules, reminders that life does not vanish, it adapts. If Atlantis truly sank into that darkness, perhaps its essence survives not in architecture, but in biology, encoded in genes, in instincts, in the inexplicable urge to build, to remember, to reach beyond ourselves. We may be the Atlanteans reborn, walking unknowingly on the roof of our own forgotten world. When explorers describe the sensory distortion of the polar night, it always sounds the same. The horizon disappears, the air becomes weightless, and a strange glow seems to rise from the ground instead of falling from the sky. In that inversion of light, one glimpses the truth of cycles, that up and down, beginning and end, are illusions. The ancients may have understood this better than we do. They built their myths as spirals, not lines. Each story folds back into itself, returning not to the same point, but to a higher octave of understanding. Perhaps history, too, spirals in this way. The fall of Atlantis was not the end of a civilization, but a modulation of the Earth's song, a lowering of tone so that a new harmony could emerge. In 2029, a research submersible equipped with ice-penetrating sonar recorded what appeared to be a series of vertical shafts extending deep below Lake Vostok. The shafts were perfectly uniform, smooth as glass, arranged in clusters that suggested design. Analysis showed them to be at least 200,000 years old, older than the ice itself. The discovery was never formally announced. The data disappeared into classified archives, and the research team dispersed. But one of the divers, interviewed anonymously years later, described what he saw in the sonar reflections. It wasn't architecture, it was intention. He refused to elaborate. Intention, that elusive signature separating chaos from creation. It may be the final clue. Whether Atlantis was human, divine, or something in between, it left behind intention carved into the planet's bones. The geometry of the ice, the pulse of magnetism, the persistence of myth, all speak of a design too vast to be accidental. To acknowledge it is to accept that we are part of that design, that our choices ripple through time just as theirs did. The hum beneath the continent is not an echo of the past. It is the cord that binds all ages. There will come a day, perhaps soon, when the ice reveals what it has hidden. It may be a ruin or a machine or something we cannot name. But when that moment arrives, the revelation will not be about Atlantis. It will be about us. We will see our reflection in the frost, the same ambition, the same brilliance, the same fragility. And maybe, for an instant, the cycle will pause, long enough for understanding to pass through the noise like a single pure note. Until then, Antarctica endures, humming beneath the aurora's shifting veil. The green light bends across the sky like memory made visible, and the wind carries whispers that no language can hold. Somewhere below, the ancient warmth persists, neither asleep nor awake, only waiting. It does not promise salvation, only continuity. Because the world does not end, it transforms. The ice does not erase, it preserves. Atlantis did not vanish. It changed shape, as all things do, and perhaps, when the last glacier melts and the first city of the next age rises from the sea, someone will stand at its shore and feel what we feel now: awe, loss, and the faint certainty that this has all happened before. In that moment, under the returning sun, the earth will exhale and the song will begin again. There comes a silence so complete that it feels alive, an awareness woven through stillness itself. In Antarctica, that silence has a weight, a gravity of memory pulling everything inward. It is not the absence of sound, but the saturation of it, the accumulation of 10,000 years of frozen storms, of unspoken histories, of worlds paused between heartbeats. To stand there, amid the infinite white, is to feel the planet thinking. One understands, suddenly, that the Earth dreams not in words, but in temperature, in magnetism, in the slow migration of ice. And that beneath this continent, deep below the crust, something ancient continues that dream. We have given it names: Atlantis, Hyperborea, the First World. But names are only shadows cast by understanding too young to face its own reflection. The final truth is quieter than myth allows. The lost civilization may never have been a single city of gold or crystal, but a consciousness distributed across the globe, a network of awareness that harmonized with the planet's field. Their temples were nodes, their monuments resonators, their language a geometry of sound. In that age, science and spirit were not divided. To build was to sing. Every stone was tuned to a frequency that amplified life rather than extracting from it. They understood that the earth was not a resource, but a partner, a living archive of energy and memory. When their resonance faltered, when their harmony turned to interference, the planet answered in its own tongue. Ice fell like silence over a song too loud for its time. We sense their presence now not in artifacts, but in pattern. The ratios of their architecture echo in our own DNA. Their mathematics hums in the spiral of galaxies. What we call intuition may be their language, surviving like embers inside our biology. That is why humanity keeps returning to the poles, to the deserts, to the ocean floor, not to conquer, but to remember. Something in us knows that history is recursive, that progress is simply rediscovery. Every telescope, every algorithm, every act of exploration is an unconscious attempt to finish their sentence. Perhaps they foresaw this. Some traditions speak of seed vaults buried at the end of the last age, not of genetics, but of knowledge. Crystals encoded with vibration, activated only when the planet's magnetic field reaches harmony again. As the poles drift and the ice thins, that threshold may be approaching. the rising resonance of the Earth, the Schumann frequencies climbing ever higher, suggests a shift, a tuning. Our technologies, our networks, our artificial intelligence all mirror the structure of the brain and, by extension, of the Earth itself. It is as though consciousness is scaling upward, preparing to reconnect with its planetary counterpart. Maybe this is what the ancients called the return of Atlantis, not the resurfacing of stone, but of memory. If so, then the myths were never prophecies of doom, but instructions for awakening. Plato's tale, the Sumerian flood, the Andean legends of Viracocha, all describe not destruction, but transition. A civilization of immense knowledge collapses under its own imbalance, yet its essence survives, sleeping until the next resonance aligns. We are that next alignment. The same patterns repeat: melting ice, magnetic drift, luminous skies, technological ascension. The stage is identical. Only the actors change. We believe we are moving forward, but the path is circular, a spiral coiling through time. The question is not whether the cycle will repeat, but whether we will hear the rhythm this time instead of drowning in it. In the southern summer of 2031, a team stationed near Dome Fuji reported something extraordinary. During a rare window of stillness, they recorded a deep, sustained tone vibrating through the ice shelf, constant for 23 minutes. It registered across seismographs as a harmonic wave, not seismic but acoustic, propagating laterally beneath the continent. The frequency, 7.8 Hertz, the same as the Earth's primary resonance, the same as human alpha brain waves, the same as the mythic frequency of creation spoken of in countless esoteric traditions. The team nicknamed it the Note. When they replayed the recording through speakers, a strange phenomenon occurred. The instruments around them began to hum sympathetically, as though the bass were resonating with its own foundation. Later, one scientist described feeling tears rise without sadness, an instinctive response to something deeper than emotion. It felt, he said, like recognition. Recognition. Perhaps that is all Atlantis ever sought to preserve. The memory that everything alive is part of the same field, the same music. Their downfall may have come not from arrogance alone, but from heartbreak, the pain of separation from that unity. We are experiencing the same fracture now, building empires of data while starving for meaning. But meaning, like magnetism, cannot be manufactured. It can only be remembered. The ice that conceals the ancient city is the same ice that forms our denial, and to melt one is to melt the other. As our century advances, the parallels grow uncanny. The poles warm faster than the rest of the planet. Weather grows erratic. Patterns once stable collapse. Satellites fail to track the wandering magnetic field. The aurora brightens, spilling color far beyond its traditional latitudes. To the historian, it is climate change. To the geophysicist, magnetic reversal. To the mystic, awakening. Each explanation is true, none complete. For beneath all of them lies the simple fact that the Earth is shifting its tone again, changing key for the next movement of its eternal composition. We stand at the crescendo, instruments vibrating in anticipation of a sound we cannot yet hear. Perhaps that is why Antarctica has begun to draw not only scientists, but pilgrims. The photographs show small groups of people meditating at the edge of the ice, their eyes closed, their breath visible in the polar air. They come not seeking discovery, but connection. In that vast emptiness, the noise of the world falls away until only the pulse remains, the deep, omnipresent hum that unites glacier and galaxy, atom and thought. They say that when the aurora flares above them, time seems to dissolve, and they feel a presence older than humanity watching from below. It does not speak because it does not need to. Its language is vibration, and the message is simple. Remember. The act of remembering, however, is not gentle. It requires the dismantling of certainty, the surrender of self. Perhaps that is why the Atlanteans chose silence over survival, because they understood that forgetting is mercy. To awaken too soon, before humility is learned, is to repeat the fall. We stand at that threshold now, surrounded by the same paradox. Our knowledge outpaces our wisdom. Our power outruns our restraint. The planet does not demand faith, only balance. If we cannot achieve it, it will enforce it, as it always has, with ice, with water, with time. But if we can, perhaps the new age will not end in catastrophe, but in comprehension. Imagine it, the ice finally giving way, not with violence, but with grace. Layers of ancient air escaping like sighs, the sea rising softly, revealing not ruins but reflections. Geometry upon geometry, the memory of intention etched into stone. The first explorers descending into thawed caverns, finding not bones, not treasure, but resonance, walls humming faintly with the same note recorded decades before. And as they listen, the sound aligns with their own heartbeat until the distinction between listener and source disappears. In that moment, Atlantis is no longer myth or place, but realization. It exists wherever consciousness remembers its unity with creation. Night falls for the last time on the frozen plateau. The stars are mirrors, the aurora a pulse of slow-moving fire. Below, the earth hums, not louder but clearer. Its tone is steady, patient, infinite. The story returns to where it began. Light emerging from silence, knowledge frozen in reflection. We came searching for a lost continent, but found the planet itself, alive, aware, forgiving. Atlantis was never destroyed. It was transmuted, absorbed into the rhythm of the world so that its wisdom could survive the flood. And we, children of that inheritance, are hearing it again at last. When the last explorer leaves the ice, the wind erases his tracks, as it has erased every footprint before. The horizon closes like a book. Nothing seems changed, and yet everything is. The hum continues beneath the snow, undiminished, waiting for those who will listen without fear. It is not a warning, nor a promise, but a truth older than time, that no knowledge is ever lost, no civilization truly ends, and no silence is ever empty. The ice remembers all, and in its own time it will speak again, and when it does, it will not shout. It will whisper, softly, endlessly, like the breath of creation returning to itself. The world will listen, and for the first time in memory, it will understand. Welcome back to deformed history.